What is good in the hood, Dream Team? Today we're back with another tutorial where we're going to be using Next.js, Tailwind and Stripe to build an excellent, basic but fully scripted e-commerce store with multiple pages, add items to basket, all this kind of good stuff, and checkout, all handled through Stripe. So without further ado, why don't we dive into it? Part one of this video is just going to be setting up the basics to get Stripe going, and then, if you wanted to just use it and build your own application, and then part two will be building out the whole site. So to start off, we are going to follow TailwindCss's instructions to get going with Next.js. So I'm going to open up the terminal and I'm going to cd into documents, cd into tutorials, and I'm going to go npx create next app e-store. And while that creates, the other thing I should mention is that for this we're also going to learn how to use Google Fonts and Font Awesome icons, and that will also be included in part one. So now that that is all installed, we're just going to straight up copy and paste these commands in. You know what we probably should have done? cd into the file first, into eStore code dot. I'll open it up in a VS Code instance and we can do it in there. Terminal, new terminal, paste in these commands. There's the first one. There's the second one. That's going to make us a Tailwind config file. We're going to copy all of this information into it. Replace everything there currently is. Nice and easy. Then we're going to copy these into the global styles. Remove all of that. Save. And just while we're in here, we're going to add in some root styling. So it's just going to be box sizing border box, margin 0, padding 0. Cool. And with that, it looks like we should be pretty good to get this up and running. npm run dev, and this is going to load up on localhost 3000. So why don't we go over and check it out? There it is, our boilerplate Tailwind Next.js application. So the first things that we're going to do is just make sure that it works with Google Fonts and Font Awesome icons and any other stuff that we want to include like that. And for that, you have to come into the pages directory and make a new file called underscore document.js. Now this is going to break your application, and for it, I'm actually just going to copy and paste from my GitHub repository, which is linked in the description. But this is just some boilerplate that basically says, okay, add this as a wrapper around our Next.js content. That way we can use links in this head, because you can't actually put links in this head. You can change these basic properties, but if you want to add CDN links or whatever, you have to use this document method. So I'm just going to save that. And in here I have the link for my Font Awesome 6.0 icon set, and once again the links for the site and the link tag will be in the description. And here I have my Google fonts, and so for this one I have Montserrat and Poppins. I think gives me a good amount of variety. So now that we've done that and that's all working, we're going to come into this index file and just clean it out. Get rid of everything that we don't need. Save that. We can refresh this page and it is blank. Perfect. We're also going to get rid of these base class names because we're going to use Tailwind. We're going to remove this import, and we're going to come into styles and delete this home.module.css. Cool. So that's all done. The next thing that we get to do is set up Stripe. And to start that off, we're actually just going to install it as a dependency. So it's going to be npm i stripe. And once that's all good, we can restart our project, and we're going to come over to the Stripe homepage where you'll need to register a profile. And for this application, we're just going to have test mode active. If you want to go live with this, you'll have to activate your account and set this to false and consequently update your keys. But we're just going to start off going to the products tab and make our first product. So I've already created mine, but basically what you do is you add product, put in some basic information, one time or recurring, however you want to do it. This is my one, so it's just drugs. You get your drugs, it's $30. Obviously I do not condone the selling of substances, but since that is all done, for however many products that you want, the next thing you'll need to do is come over to your developer tab and head over to API keys. And these two keys here, we're going to need to come back into our project directory and make a new file called .env.local. And you'll have to make sure this doesn't get uploaded to your GitHub or whatever, but it should be included in git ignore. So, yeah, there it is. And in here we're going to have stripe public is equal to, and stripe underscore secret is equal to. And what you're going to want to do is copy both of these keys. And obviously you can't see my secret one, but I'm just going to copy it in there just like I did the first one. And that's all we need to do to give Stripe authorization for our project. So now that we have our keys set up, we're going to come into our API. Actually, we're going to go into our index component first. And in here, what we're going to do is start off by fetching all of the information from Stripe. So we're going to create an export async function get server side props, and that is going to take context as its argument. We're going to open that up, and in here what we're going to do is initialize a Stripe session. So Stripe is equal to new Stripe, and what you're going to pass it is process.env.stripe underscore secret, and if that doesn't exist, we're just going to give it an empty string, and then we're also going to pass it an object where you give it the API version, which is just standard. Now once we've initialized Stripe, we're going to request all of the products, and so we're going to have await, which is why we need the async syntax above. If you aren't clear on how that works, I'll be making a video about that soon. But it's going to be await stripe.prices.list, and in here we're going to give it a limit of 10, and we're going to expand your horizons by getting the product data. And once we have the response, we're going to get prices from it. So prices is equal to res.data.filter price, and we're just going to return whether or not the price is currently active, because you can archive things in Stripe. And then the last step here is we're going to return props as an object with just prices, and this information will be injected into our main component down here under the alias of prices. Cool. So now that we have all of that, if we come into here and console.log prices, we should be able to go over to our application, refresh this page, inspect it, and look at our console. And here you'll see we have our drugs product, which is just what we needed. So for the second, I'm just going to pop that over there, bring up this terminal here, and we can start coding out the rest of the application. So now that we can load the products, the next thing we're going to do is just, since there's only one, well actually we may as well just render them out all. So we're just going to go prices.map an individual, and we're going to name it price, and we're going to take an index, and for each of them we're just going to return a div with key equal to index, and we are going to return a div with key equal to index, and inside of here, we're going to close that. We are just going to render out price.product.name. And so that's going to show up on the screen. That's all good. Excellent. So because this is just going to be a quick video, the last thing we're going to do down here is put a button, and we're going to give it we're just going to say checkout. And in this particular instance, we're going to use state to manage our, well, actually, we don't even have to do that. So just to see how the checkout system works, what we're going to do is come into API, and we currently have this hello file, and here we are going to rename this checkout.js, and we're just going to add some checkout logic, which we're going to eventually connect to our checkout button, just to see how you can purchase drugs. So the first thing we're going to do is enter in some spaces, and we're going to start off by saying if request.method is not equal to post, then you will have a bad time. So that's going to be return res.status 405.json, and we're just going to pass the message as post method required. The next thing we're going to do, if that doesn't happen, we're also going to go if body.line, actually before the step we just have to, so they've posted something, they've given us a body, so we need to deconstruct that. So that's going to be body is equal to json.pass request.body. So that's going to take any JSON that we receive in this particular checkout request, and it's going to pass it. And then if body.lineItems .length is equal to 0, we're going to return res.status, again a 405.json message, please select items for purchase. So that's just if there's nothing in their checkout, then we're going to be like, well, what are you going to purchase? And the last thing we're going to do is have a try catch block where we make the magic happen. And this is going to be try, and we're going to initialize another Stripe session here. New Stripe, auto imports are great. Process.env.stripe secret. Once again, double question mark, otherwise an empty string. And in here, what we're going to do is pass it the API version, just like before. Whatever that default was, just like that. After that, we're going to initialize a session, a checkout session, and that is equal to await, which all the more importantly reminds me that we actually need to add an async up here to make this an asynchronous function so that it can await. And we're going to go stripe.checkout.sessions.create. Nice, that's quite a mouthful. We're going to give it a success. Stripe.checkout.sessions.create. Yeah, that's correct. We're going to give it a success URL is equal to http://localhost, whatever local host you're on, 3000 success. We're going to give it a cancel URL of the same thing as above, so I'm just going to copy that and change it to cancel. We're going to give it line items, which is equal to body.line items, and the last thing is just mode, and that's going to be payment. Cool. And so with that, the last thing that we have to do is res.send status first. 201.send, actually we're going to go .json, and we're just going to send the session, and that's going to return it to our front end, and down here we're going to go res.status 500.send, and we're just going to go message, error.message. Cool, so that's our checkout logic complete. The next thing that we're going to want to do is come back into our index file, and we're going to add just up here a checkout. I'm actually just going to write this as by, makes it more funny. Oh, yeah, so we're going to add a function called checkout. And in this particular instance, it's not going to do much at all, but it's going to be an asynchronous function once again. And in here, what we're going to do is just create an item called line items. So const line items is equal to, and in this case, it's just going to be an object. And since we only have one thing, and that's our drugs, it's just going to be a price, which is going to be the price ID. So when we consoled earlier, I don't know if we'll still be able to see it. Is it still there? Yeah, okay. So we're just going to give it prices 0 dot, so that's going to give it this first element, array of 0. And we are going to pass the ID, the product ID specifically. So it's going to be price.product.id, and in here we're just going to have a quantity of 1. Cool, so that's going to be our line items. And then the next thing we have to do is make a request, and so that's going to be await fetch. Await fetch, and we're going to give it API/checkout, so it's going to send it to the checkout, and it's going to take a couple of things. So the first thing is going to have to be the method, which is post, and the second thing is going to be a body, which is going to be json.stringify. We're going to pass it an object of line items, just like that. And then from that, we're going to receive the request that we sent here. So this is we're going to receive that thingy McJiggy and so it's going to be const data is equal to await res.json. And then the last thing we're going to do is go router.push data.session.url. And oh, that does not have those curly braces there. It does have one though. And that's good, so imported router, so that's awesome. So this, theoretically, well actually the last thing we have to do is just add it to check it out. Well actually even funnier, let's just add it here. So we're just going to go on click is equal to checkout. So when we click on this particular, actually let's just make it cursor pointer. I'm just going to get rid of this. So this says buy drugs. So over here what we're going to do is buy drugs. Cannot read URL. So obviously we're not receiving a URL. So let's just console.log data. Inspect console buy drugs. What happens? Message cannot read, reading create. I notice we have a little spelling error. This should actually be sessions. Spelling errors. Okay, so now if we refresh this page and we click buy drugs, we receive invalid array. The one other thing I forgot to add that we just have to add is that in here where we pass our line items, this should actually be an array of objects where each object is specified like that. Because obviously if you have multiple different products, that's how each product will be laid out. And so this was also earlier product, but it should actually just be price to ID. But the one last thing we have to do is come over to our Stripe account, and if you're new, you'll have to name your store. So I'm just calling mine James's Drugs. And so we don't actually have that route set up yet, but if we just come over here and buy drugs, we get this session, and it will give us a URL. Actually, it totally will work. So now we can just, and yeah, just be sure to update the import here. But now when we have this whole system working, we can get rid of all of our console logs, and we buy our drugs. Takes us to a checkout. We can just enter whatever.com, enter some random details. I think that should do. Name on card. And when we do this, it will not work, and we don't have a failure route. So this whole thing is going to absolutely crash. This page could not be found, but it actually did work because I gave it the fake credentials. But that's essentially how you set up this whole system. Just to quickly make the pages, what you would do is in pages just here, you would create a page called cancel.js and another one called success.js, and style them out however you like. But yeah, that's essentially how you set up a system to RFC will just autofill them out. Set up a system so we successfully bought drugs. Awesome. And that's how that whole Stripe checkout system works, using their billing information. So that's part 1 finished. Part 2, we're actually going to style out the whole application so that we can properly, define quantities of drugs and stuff like that. So yeah, if you like the video so far, like and subscribe, and check out the next one. See you soon.